Hello, DonTheCrown here, and today we're going to talk about the Burst Deathblade build. This video will cover the overview of the build, chaos and raid skill sets, a breakdown of the skills that we're using, recommendations for engraving, stats, and card sets. The Deathblade is a mostly melee class that focuses on quick movement and back attacks. This build works around the Burst class engraving, which is one of the 2 class engravings available for the Deathblade. This class engraving involves dealing a bunch of small hits before unleashing a Giga Slash with our identity skill, and I mean an absolutely huge slash with our identity skill. The way our identity works on the Deathblade is that as we deal damage, we fill up a series of orbs that are then used as fuel when we activate our identity by pressing Z. When you activate your identity, you'll receive a scaling buff to your movement speed, attack speed, mana recovery, and attack power that persists for as long as you remain inside your identity. You will also reduce all active cooldowns upon activating your identity mode. And this all sounds probably pretty complex, but basically hit things to fill up the orbs, activate orbs for a buff, and the more orbs you got, the bigger the buff, and the orbs go down while they're active, they don't go up. Having the identity skill active slowly burns down your orbs at a rate of an orb every 10 seconds. You can activate your identity a second time to consume the remaining orb energy to unleash a slash whose damage and size scales based off how many orbs you had remaining at the time of the slash. Or at least that's how it works for the other Deathblades. For us, thanks to our class engraving, no matter when we activate our slash, it'll always act as if we released a 3-orb Giga Slash, and we can scale this Giga Slash up to do massive damage. While we're in our identity, we'll gain a stacking engraving buff every time a skill hits an enemy, with the exception of our awakening skill. There are a host of skills that hit enemies multiple times and generate multiple stacks. Not all abilities that appear to hit multiple times will actually grant multiple stacks, because you can only gain a stack every 0.4 seconds, so we have to use specific skills. These stacks grant 7.5% increased damage with our finishing slash and return 5% of our total orb pool per stack when we slash. Also, at engravings level 2 and 3, these stacks will grant half a percentage and 1% attack power per stack. This means that if you slash with 20 stacks, it will do 150% increased damage, return your entire orb pool, and you have 20% increased attack power at the time if you are using the 3rd level of the engraving. And yes, 20 stacks is the cap. Overall, this leads to some giant hits. Moving on to the skill build, this build generally can handle all PvE content without having to change the skills around too much. You can make some substitutions here and there, but I think that these are the best options. Starting off, Spincutter is a nice movement skill that spins 2 times and grants 2 stacks if you hit with each of the spins. You can use this to help you move around the battlefield, and it also provides a crucial team buff of 3% more damage taken by targets hit and 9% more front and back attacks by those targets as well, making this grant us 12% more damage on our back attacks. At level 10, this skill gets a 3rd spin, which grants us an additional stack. This skill should be used often to debuff bosses and is good for moving us a bit faster than normal movement. Next, I want to talk about our big stack earners, Windcut and Void Strike. These 2 skills generate 4 and 6 stacks respectively because they both leave behind area of effect ground damaging skills. Windcut throws out a saw blade that grows in size and has an extremely short cooldown. Although this skill is core to our gameplay, it does not hit all that hard, and so you'll likely keep it at level 7 for a long time. Reducing the cooldown and extending the duration makes this skill provide 4 stacks every 8 seconds without any additional cooldown reduction. For the 3rd tripod, you can either go with Thick Sword Energy, which just sounds cool and makes the saw blade expand over time, or you can use Sword Energy Explosion, which doesn't sound as cool, but it will keep the blade small and 1 additional hit at the end. I recommend going with the Thick Sword Energy because bosses are going to move around, but I could see using the explosion on super slow bosses. Our other stacker skill, Void Strike, channels up a damaging swipe which then leaves behind a shadow zone that ticks for damage and stacks over time. Without the pool, this skill would only grant 1 stack because the pool alone is granting us the other 5 stacks. as long as something is hit by that pool. The skill has a long cooldown, so you want to make sure that you land it when you use it. The first tripod will speed up the attack, the second grants the pool, and the third increases the damage. It might be tempting to use the Dark Dimension tripod, but this makes the skill take a long time to use, which can lead to you taking damage. One pro tip is that you should always aim to use one of these two skills just before you go into identity mode, so that the massive cooldown reduction from the 3 orbs will help make your Void Strike or Wind Cut come off cooldown faster. You will still get some of the stacks from the skill if you activate identity right away. Next, let's talk about our 2 heavy hitting skills, Blitz Rush and Soul Absorber. Soul Absorber is a charged up skill that releases 2 medium strength slashes when fully charged that do good damage when combined. You can also change the direction of the second slash to help avoid incoming damage. We take the Swift Fingers tripod for faster charges, Fist of Darkness for more damage, and Have for a second swing. This skill grants 2 stacks, does a great job of filling up our orbs when we're building identity, and also deals destruction damage. Blitz Rush is our big blast damage skill. This skill only grants 1 stack, but this skill is more about the damage than the stacks. Always try to have this on cooldown before you activate identity so they can benefit from the cooldown reduction. For tripods, we take Vital Point Strike for more crit, Charge Enhancement to do more damage, and then Shadow Rush for even more damage. It might look like dual Blitz should be great for lots of stacks, but it actually does much less damage and only grants 2 stacks. Weird, right? Next, our counter skill is Earth Cleaver. This skill is oddly both a front and back attack skill, meaning that it can benefit from both back attacking, while also can be used as a counter if hitting the front of the boss when they glow blue. The Push Tripod makes us charge forward and grants an additional stack before the attack swipes, and then Weak Point Detection Tripod increases our boss damage, and the Earth Explosion sends out a series of spikes that can grant stacks as well. Against single targets, the skill will likely only grant 2 stacks, but against multi-target fights, I've seen this grant 4. The skill also deals destruction damage, so keep that in mind for fights that call for destruction. When you don't have a lot of skill points, you're probably going to not be putting a ton of points into this, because the Charge Tripod basically gives you most of what you want out of this skill. Next are 2 utility skills. Maelstrom creates a tornado around you that hits multiple times, but will only ever grant 1 stack. We take this because it makes all of our other skills used during its duration grant more orb power. This is really nice for ramping up for our first identity, or after having a bad stacking session or death. Later on, this can also grant a move and attack speed buff for your whole team. Dark Axel is our super movement skill that is one of the only non-awakening ways to move over large bosses like Guardians. The skill throws us forward a large distance, which is incredibly useful for remaining behind a boss or closing a gap with a boss who has just moved. The skill also provides super armor while in the air, which can help you get out of trouble. For tripods, we take Swift Fingers to go faster, Tenacity for the super armor, and High Axel to jump over bosses and travel farther. This skill only grants 1 stack, but should be held somewhat in reserve for movement because we will be spamming Spincutter for stacks. Lastly, we're using the first awakening skill, Flash Blink, for our awakening. This skill does great damage and generates a lot of orb power for us, whereas the other awakening skill really isn't that great. You want to try and maintain high uptime on the debuff applied by Spincutter while also spamming out your other skills with a focus on Wind Cut and Void Strike for their stack generation. Note that all of your skills have back attack, which increases their damage and crit strike chance when attacking from behind. If you have to choose between attacking from behind or not taking damage, choose to avoid taking damage. We're not an extremely tanky class, and generally not taking damage will lead to you staying healthier and in the fight longer. Note that if your orbs run out without slashing, you'll still get the orb energy return from your stacks, but your slash damage will be completely lost. This also counts when transitioning between zones like in Chaos Dungeon. Always try to either be not in your identity when taking these portals, or to be at 20 stacks. Also, it's a lot better to slash at lower stacks than to be greedy and try to go for 20 and running out of your identity. If you find yourself out of your identity with no energy, using Maelstrom with your awakening should help fill up your bar significantly. Soul Absorber also fills up your bar significantly like this. And if you don't have any of those, an awakening potion can help fill you up to 100% instantaneously, but that costs gold. For stats, we're going to stack specialization to the sky, and then secondary is crit. Specialization helps us build up our orbs faster if we fail to stack to 20, and increases the amount of cooldown reduction we get on activation of our identity, and then also scales the damage of our slash. So more specialization equals more damage, more cooldown reduction, and easier time getting up to 3 orbs. It's great. For engravings, we want at least level 1 of our class engraving, and then you can either continue to stack it to level 3, or you can use combat engravings such as Master of Ambush, Grudge, or Cursed Doll. Each of these benefits our entire skill setup, but note that Master of Ambush only increases damage when you're hitting from the back, and Grudge and Cursed Doll both have strong downsides that will likely get you killed as you're learning the class. The 20% increased damage taken from Grudge should not be underestimated at all, and the reduced healing from Cursed Doll is nearly as punishing. Especially as you're a new player, these two engravings can be somewhat of a noob trap that'll get you killed a whole bunch more than normal. Other good engravings are Adrenaline, because you'll keep the damage increasing effect up all of the time, and then the extra crit is really great as well. Supercharge is that okay option because it benefits our Blitz Rush, Void Strike, and Soul Absorber skills, but it doesn't increase the damage of our final slash. This engraving is somewhat nice though, because getting to move around faster because these skills cast faster keep you from taking damage. For card sets, we eventually want to get the Lost Wind Cliff set, which is a combination of legendary cards and 2 cards that are somewhat farmable. The blue card Saria is purchasable from traveling merchants in Lutera, and the green card Solace is a reward for completing the Lost Wind Cliff story quest. If you're feeling somewhat sweaty, you can create a new character, level them through the quest, and then delete them in about 4 hours time, which is maybe a little much. Before you get those cards, you could use basically any card that either increases your maximum health or gives you generic damage reduction. And that's it for the guide. It's been a lot of fun playing Blade on the Russian servers. It's really fun, fast-paced build, has some really big popping numbers, and once you kind of get down into the groove of building up your stacks, it just feels very smooth and fun to play. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and come by the stream. We're playing on the Don server.